For 500 years, humanity was thought to be nothing more than a forgotten myth, their disappearance a mystery buried in the annals of time. But now, from the dark edge of known space, a fleet of 10,000 colossal ships emerges, bearing the survivors of an ancient race believed lost to the void. What were once stories of human resilience and ingenuity are about to become reality, and as they make their return, the galaxy will discover that humanity's journey through the cosmic wilderness has transformed them into something unimaginable. The question is no longer whether humans are real, it's what they've become in the silence of the stars. When legends become reality Dr. Zara Veltar brushed the ancient dust from her claws as she carefully examined the metallic object buried beneath centuries of sediment. The Ketheri archaeologist had spent 3 months excavating this site on Kepler-7, and each discovery made her 4 hearts beat faster with excitement. This particular artifact was unlike anything in the galactic databases. The metal was strange, composed of elements that shouldn't exist together according to known science. Etched symbols covered its surface, symbols that matched the mysterious language found in ruins across 17 different worlds. The same language that scholars had debated for decades. The same language that belonged to a species everyone believed was nothing more than legend. Humans. Zara's scaled fingers traced the markings with reverence. According to the oldest stories, humans had once been part of the galactic community. They were described as bipedal creatures with smooth skin, incredible adaptability, and an unusual talent for innovation. But that was 500 years ago, before they simply vanished without explanation. Most civilizations now considered them myths, like the great space dragons or the singing stars. Her communicator buzzed with an urgent message from her research partner, Dr. Keth Morvain, a brilliant Zentari scientist with a passion for ancient technologies. His excitement was clear, even through the translation matrix. Zara, you need to see this immediately. The artifact you sent me yesterday, it's not just decorative. It's a device, and I think it's still functional. She packed her equipment quickly and made her way back to the orbital research station. The journey gave her time to think about the implications. If humans had truly existed, where had they gone? Why had they left behind so little evidence of their civilization? And most importantly, what had happened to them? The research station buzzed with activity when she arrived. Keth met her at the docking bay, his usually calm demeanor replaced by barely contained excitement. His blue skin had turned a deeper shade, a sign of intense emotion among his species. The device activated when I exposed it to quantum resonance, he explained as they walked toward his laboratory. It began transmitting a signal into deep space. The mathematical complexity is beyond anything we've seen before. In the lab, the artifact sat on a specialized analysis table, humming softly with energy. Holographic displays showed wave patterns and data streams that made Zara's head spin. But what caught her attention was the image on the main screen, a star map with coordinates pointing to the edge of known space. It's a beacon, Keth said softly. Or perhaps a message. Either way, something out there is responding. 3 days later, the response came not to their small research station, but to the Galactic Council itself. Prime Theron, the elected leader of the 12 major civilizations, stared at the massive holographic display in the council chamber. The message was simple but earth-shattering. People of the galaxy, this is Admiral Marcus Kane of the Terran Exploration Fleet. We know it has been many centuries since our last communication. We have been away, learning, growing, and surviving in places you cannot imagine. We request permission to return home. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives from a dozen species began shouting in their native languages, their translation devices struggling to keep up with the cacophony. Some claimed it was a hoax, others feared an invasion, and a few wondered if this was some elaborate test by the Council itself. Prime Theron, a being whose species had learned patience through millennia of diplomacy, raised his hand for silence. His voice carried the weight of authority when he spoke. If this message is genuine, then we face a situation unprecedented in galactic history. A species we believed extinct has returned, claiming to have advanced beyond our current understanding. We must proceed with caution, but also with hope. The debate raged for hours. Security Chief Valen argued for immediate military preparation, convinced this was the beginning of an invasion. Science advisor Quinn wanted to study the transmission, believing it could unlock secrets of advanced physics. Cultural Minister Eris worried about the psychological impact on billions of citizens who would learn that their ancient stories were real. Finally, Prime Theron made the decision that would change the galaxy forever. We will respond with cautious welcome. If these are truly humans returning after 5 centuries, then they deserve our attention. But we will be prepared for any outcome. The Council's response was broadcast on all frequencies. Admiral Kane, the Galactic Council acknowledges your transmission. You are welcome to approach the Kepler system for preliminary contact. A delegation will meet you there. What happened next stunned everyone who witnessed it. The stars themselves seemed to shift as massive shapes emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. One ship, then 10, then hundreds, until finally 10,000 vessels of incredible size and design hung motionless in the void. They were unlike anything in the galactic databases, smooth and organic-looking, as if they had been grown rather than built. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the flagship Endurance, looking out at the system where his ancestors had once lived. He was a tall man with graying hair and eyes that had seen wonders and horrors in equal measure. Beside him, Captain Elena Rodriguez studied the approaching council ships with the analytical mind that had made her the fleet's chief diplomat. Nervous? Elena asked, noticing the slight tension in Marcus's shoulders. Terrified, he admitted with a slight smile. We've been preparing for this moment for 50 years. But now that it's here, I wonder if we've changed too much. If they'll even recognize us as the same species that left so long ago. Elena placed a reassuring hand on his arm. We're still human, Marcus. That hasn't changed, no matter what we've learned or how we've adapted. The curiosity, the determination, the refusal to give up, those things are still who we are. The council delegation arrived in a ship that seemed tiny compared to the human vessels, but Marcus ordered his fleet to maintain a respectful distance. This first meeting would determine the fate of billions of beings across both civilizations. Prime Theron's ship docked with the Endurance, and for the first time in 500 years, humans and galactic citizens shared the same space. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and Theron stepped through. Followed by his scientific and diplomatic staff, the moment was electric with possibility and tension. Here were 2 civilizations, separated by half a millennium, meeting again under circumstances none could have imagined. Theron, whose people resembled tall, graceful trees with conscious thought, extended what passed for a hand in greeting. Marcus stepped forward and accepted the gesture, a simple contact that bridged 5 centuries of separation. Prime Theron, on behalf of humanity, I thank you for this meeting. We have much to discuss. Indeed we do, Admiral Kane. The galaxy has many questions about your people's disappearance and your remarkable return. But first, we must know your intentions. 10,000 ships is a statement of considerable strength. Elena moved to Marcus's side, her diplomatic training taking over. Prime Theron, we come in peace, but we also come with urgent news. Our journey through the void has shown us wonders beyond imagination, but also dangers that threaten all life in this galaxy. We need your help, and you will need ours. Dr. Zara Veltar, who had been included in the delegation due to her discovery of the human artifact, stepped forward with barely contained excitement. Admiral, Captain, please forgive my eagerness, but I must ask, where have you been? Our archaeological evidence suggests your people simply vanished without trace. Marcus and Elena exchanged a look that spoke of shared knowledge and heavy responsibility. Dr. Veltar, that is a story that will take time to tell properly. We didn't just disappear, we were forced to leave this dimension entirely. We've spent the last 5 centuries learning to survive in parallel realities, adapting to environments that shouldn't be able to support life, and developing technologies that bend the very laws of physics. Prime Theron's expression showed the careful control of someone processing information that challenged everything he thought he knew. You speak of parallel dimensions as if they were neighboring star systems. Such things are theoretical at best in our science. Not anymore, Elena said with a slight smile. We've learned that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than any of us imagined. But we've also learned that it's far more dangerous. The threat that forced us to leave has grown stronger, and it's coming here. The delegation hall fell silent as the weight of her words settled over them. Dr. Keth Morvain, who had been quietly recording everything, looked up from his instruments with wide eyes. Captain Rodriguez, are you saying that your entire species has been hiding in other dimensions for 5 centuries? Not hiding, Marcus corrected firmly. Surviving, learning, and preparing. We made a promise when we left that we would return stronger, capable of protecting not just ourselves, but all life in this galaxy. That time has come. Security Chief Valen, who had been suspicious from the beginning, couldn't contain his concern. Admiral, you claim to come in peace, but you arrive with a fleet larger than our entire combined military. How do we know this isn't an elaborate invasion plan? Elena's expression hardened slightly, but her voice remained diplomatic. Chief Valen, if we wanted to invade, do you think we would announce ourselves and request permission to approach? We've had the capability to appear anywhere in your space without warning for decades. We choose to respect your sovereignty because we remember what it means to be part of a galactic community. Prime Theron raised his hand to prevent further argument. Admiral Kane, Captain Rodriguez, your words raise as many questions as they answer. But the sincerity in your voices suggests truth. Perhaps it would be best if you could demonstrate some of these advances you speak of, not as a threat, but as proof of your claims. Marcus nodded and activated a small device on his wrist. The air in the center of the room shimmered, and suddenly a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared, but not as any of them had ever seen it before. This map showed layers of reality, parallel dimensions stacked like sheets of transparent crystal, each containing its own version of space and time. This is how we see the universe now, Marcus explained. Your reality is just one layer among infinite others. We've learned to travel between them, to harvest energy from dimensional differences, and to see threats that exist outside normal space-time. Dr. Zara stared at the display with wonder. It's beautiful and terrifying, but you mentioned a threat. What kind of danger exists in these other dimensions? Elena's expression grew grave. Something we call the Void Eaters. They consume entire realities, leaving nothing but empty space where universes once existed. They destroyed our original home dimension, forcing us to flee here. But they've been following us, learning from each reality they devour, growing stronger. And they're coming here, Marcus added quietly. Our long-range sensors detect the edge of their influence approaching this dimension. We estimate 18 months before they arrive in this galaxy. The silence that followed was deafening. Every being in the room understood the implications immediately. This wasn't just a reunion between lost civilizations, it was a warning of approaching apocalypse. Prime Theron was the first to speak, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he'd learned. If what you say is true, then our petty concerns about territorial disputes and trade agreements become meaningless. We face extinction itself. Yes, Elena said simply, but we also face the greatest opportunity in galactic history. Humans have spent 5 centuries learning to fight creatures that exist beyond normal physics. We've developed weapons that can hurt them, defenses that can slow them, and strategies that can drive them back. But we can't do it alone. We need the combined strength, knowledge, and determination of every species in this galaxy. Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Prime Theron, members of the Council, we offer you a choice. Stand with us, share knowledge and resources, fight together against the darkness that's coming, and we all might survive. Or maintain your suspicions and divisions, and watch as everything you've built disappears into the void. The human delegation had delivered their message. Now the fate of two civilizations, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. Outside the ship, 10,000 human vessels waited silently, their crews prepared for whatever decision the council would make. But time was running out, and in the deep void between dimensions, something vast and hungry had noticed the light of their galaxy and begun to move toward it with terrible purpose. What humanity became in the void the council emergency session lasted 18 hours, the longest in galactic history. Representatives from every major civilization gathered in the Great Chamber on Central Prime, their voices rising and falling in heated debate. The holographic displays showed Admiral Kane's dimensional maps alongside threat assessments and military projections that painted an increasingly grim picture. Prime Theron stood at the center of it all, feeling the weight of an impossible decision. Around him, the greatest minds in the galaxy struggled to understand concepts that challenged everything they thought they knew about reality itself. The Doctor, Zara Veltar, had barely slept since the revelation. She sat in her assigned research station, surrounded by human artifacts that now seemed to pulse with new meaning. Each piece told a story of a species that had adapted to the impossible, survived where survival should have been impossible, and returned stronger than anyone could have imagined. Her colleague, Dr. Keth Morvain, worked beside her, his instruments detecting energy signatures from human devices that defied all known physics. Zara, look at these readings. The quantum signatures suggest these artifacts are existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The humans haven't just learned to travel between realities, they've learned to exist in several at once. Before she could respond, her communicator chimed with an urgent message from Captain Rodriguez. Dr. Veltar, Admiral Kane requests your presence aboard the Endurance. We believe your archaeological work has given you insights that could help us explain our history more clearly. An hour later, Zara found herself aboard the human flagship, walking through corridors that seemed to shift and flow around her. The walls weren't solid metal, but something that appeared organic, almost alive. Everything hummed with energy that her instruments couldn't fully measure. Captain Elena Rodriguez met her at what appeared to be an observation deck, though the view outside showed not just normal space, but glimpses of other realities layering over each other like double-exposed photographs. Elena herself looked entirely human, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of experiences beyond normal comprehension. Dr. Veltar, thank you for coming. Admiral Kane is preparing a full demonstration for the Council, but we thought you might appreciate seeing where we've been firsthand. Elena led her to a circular chamber where Admiral Kane waited along with several other humans. But as Zara looked around, she realized some of the figures weren't entirely human anymore. One man's skin seemed to shift between different textures, while a woman's eyes reflected patterns that existed in multiple dimensions at once. The void changed us, Marcus explained, noticing her surprise. Not everyone adapted in the same way. Some of us developed the ability to perceive multiple realities simultaneously. Others learned to phase between dimensions. A few even learned to communicate with the energy patterns that exist between universes. He gestured to a woman whose hair seemed to contain actual starlight. This is Dr. Sarah Chun, our chief xenobiologist. She was part of the first team that made contact with the beings who taught us dimensional travel. Dr. Chin stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice seemed to come from multiple places at once. Dr. Veltar, your people have been studying our artifacts for decades, but you've only seen the simplest examples. Would you like to see what we learned to become? Before Zara could answer, the chamber around them shifted. Suddenly, they weren't aboard a ship, but standing on what appeared to be a crystalline platform floating in the void between stars. But this wasn't normal space. This was the dimension between dimensions where the fundamental forces of reality were laid bare. We lived here for 2 centuries, Elena explained, her voice somehow carrying clearly in the airless environment, learning from beings of pure energy, creatures that existed as living mathematics, civilizations that built their cities from folded space-time. Around them, impossible structures became visible. Cities that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, beings that communicated through gravitational waves, and energy patterns that Zara's mind couldn't fully process. But somehow, she could sense the incredible intelligence behind it all. The void taught us that existence is far more flexible than we ever imagined, Marcus continued. Matter and energy, space and time, life and death, these are just different ways of arranging the same fundamental patterns. Once you understand that, you can learn to rearrange those patterns yourself. Dr. Chun waved her hand, and suddenly Zara could see the quantum structure of her own body, the way her consciousness interacted with matter, and the energy patterns that made her who she was. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, but the most important thing we learned, Elena said softly, was that intelligence and creativity are the most powerful forces in any universe. The Void Eaters can devour matter and energy, but they struggle against beings who can think in ways they've never encountered. The vision faded, and they were back in the ship's chamber. Zara's legs felt weak, and she had to sit down to process what she'd experienced. How many of you are there? How many humans survived the journey? About 40 million, Marcus replied, spread across 17 different dimensional refuges. Some are still recognizably human. Others have adapted so far that you might not recognize them as the same species. But we're all still connected by the same core values: curiosity, determination, and the refusal to give up hope. Elena activated a holographic display showing the approaching threat. The Void Eaters aren't just destroyers, Dr. Veltar. They're entities that exist outside normal reality, feeding on the energy released when universes collapse. They've consumed thousands of realities, growing stronger with each one. The display showed a spreading darkness at the edge of space-time, moving inexorably toward their dimension. But they have weaknesses. They can't adapt to truly creative solutions, and they struggle against coordinated resistance from multiple species working together. Zara looked at the advancing threat, then at the humans around her, who had spent centuries learning to fight the impossible. What do you need from us? What can my people, what can any of our civilizations possibly contribute to a fight like this? Dr. Chin smiled, and for a moment her modified features looked entirely human. Dr. Veltar, you've been studying our artifacts for years, learning to understand our technology and our methods. But more importantly, you've been learning to think the way we think. That's exactly what we need. Marcus stepped forward, his expression serious but hopeful. The Void Eaters have learned to counter every strategy we've developed over 5 centuries. But they've never encountered the combined creativity of 12 different species working together. Your people's mathematical insight, the Zentari's pattern recognition, the Ketheri's archaeological intuition, all of it working together in ways the enemy has never seen. Elena brought up another display, this one showing battle plans that seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We're not asking your people to become like us, Dr. Veltar. We're asking them to remain exactly who they are, because diversity of thought is our greatest weapon. Back on Central Prime, the council session had reached a critical point. Prime Theron stood before the assembled representatives, the weight of an entire galaxy's future on his shoulders. The holographic displays around him showed military assets, population centers, and defensive capabilities that seemed pathetically inadequate against the approaching threat. We have heard Admiral Kane's proposal, he announced to the chamber. Share our knowledge and resources with humanity, learn their dimensional technologies, and prepare for a war unlike anything in galactic history. The alternative is to maintain our current divisions and face extinction. Security Chief Valen rose from his seat, his voice carrying skepticism and fear. Prime Theron, how do we know this isn't an elaborate deception? These humans appear with capabilities beyond our understanding, claim to have spent centuries fighting an invisible enemy, and ask us to restructure our entire civilization based on their word alone. Before Prime Theron could respond, the Chamber's communication system activated with an urgent alert. Prime Theron, this is Deep Space Monitor Station Omega 7. We're detecting massive gravitational anomalies at the edge of the spiral arm. Something is disrupting space-time itself. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Admiral Kane's warning about the 18-month timeline suddenly seemed optimistic to Dr. Keth Morvain, who had been monitoring the human ships from his research station, added his voice to the growing alarm. Prime Theron, I'm detecting energy signatures from the human fleet that suggest they're preparing for immediate combat operations. Whatever they see out there, they consider it an immediate threat. Prime Theron activated his personal communicator to contact the human flagship. Admiral Kane, our sensors are detecting anomalies that match your descriptions of the Void Eater approach. Are we already out of time? Marcus's voice came through clearly, but there was an edge of urgency that hadn't been there before. Prime Theron, the advanced scouts have arrived earlier than expected. We estimate 6 hours before they begin testing your reality's defenses. The main force won't arrive for months, but if these scouts succeed in establishing a foothold, it won't matter. The chamber erupted in panic. Representatives began shouting orders to their home worlds, demanding immediate evacuation protocols and emergency defense measures. But Prime Theron knew, as they all did, that conventional defenses would be useless against entities that existed outside normal physics. Admiral Kane, he said, his voice cutting through the chaos, what do you need from us immediately? Permission to begin defensive operations in your space and access to your quantum communication networks. We need to coordinate with our other fleets, and we need to start teaching your scientists our defensive technologies immediately. Prime Theron looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who had lived their entire lives in relative peace, now confronting the reality of cosmic war. The choice was no longer theoretical. You have our permission, Admiral. God help us all, but you have our permission. As the council session dissolved into frantic activity, Dr. Zara Veltar watched from the Endurance as the human fleet began to transform. Ships that had appeared organic and peaceful now revealed their true nature as beings of war adapted to impossible conflicts. Weapons systems activated that bent space-time around them, shields that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and communications arrays that reached across reality itself. But what struck her most was the calm determination on every human face she saw. These people had spent 5 centuries preparing for this moment, and now that it had arrived, they were ready. Elena Rodriguez appeared beside her at the observation deck. Dr. Veltar, we're about to witness the first battle between the Void Eaters and a fully prepared galactic civilization. Your people are about to see what we learned in the darkness between worlds. Outside, reality itself began to waver as something vast and hungry approached from the spaces between dimensions. The war for existence was about to begin. Unity against the storm, the first attack came not as explosions or energy beams, but as a wrongness in reality itself. Space around the outer monitoring stations began to fold and twist, as if the very fabric of existence was being digested by something that should not exist. Admiral Marcus Kane stood in the command center of the Endurance, watching displays that showed the approaching Void Eaters not as ships or creatures, but as living tears in space-time. His centuries of experience fighting these entities had taught him to read the signs. The way stars flickered and went dark, the manner in which gravity itself became uncertain, and the horrible silence that preceded their arrival. Fleet status, he called out, his voice calm despite the magnitude of what they faced. All ships report ready. Admiral, came the response from his tactical officer, Commander Lisa Park, whose enhanced senses could perceive across 17 different dimensional layers simultaneously. Dimensional anchors are active, quantum disruptors are charged, and reality stabilizers are at full power. Prime Theron's voice crackled through the communication system from Central Prime. Admiral Kane, our sensors can barely detect what you're seeing. Our scientists are requesting real-time data to understand how to help. Connecting you now, Prime Theron, Elena Rodriguez replied from her position at the diplomatic station. Dr. Chun is transmitting quantum signature data to your research teams. But I need to warn you, the first encounter is going to be unlike anything your people have experienced. On Central Prime, Dr. Zara Veltar worked frantically alongside Dr. Keth Morvain and a hastily assembled team of the galaxy's brightest scientists. The data streaming from the human fleet painted a picture that challenged every law of physics they thought they understood. The approaching entities existed in negative space, feeding on the energy released when reality collapsed around them. It's like they're turning existence inside out, Keth muttered, his instruments struggling to process readings that shouldn't be possible. How do you fight something that unravels the fundamental forces that hold the universe together? Dr. Sarah Chen's voice came through their communication link, her multidimensional awareness allowing her to observe the battle from perspectives no normal being could access. You fight them by refusing to let reality collapse. Our ships aren't just vessels, they're reality anchors holding space-time stable through pure determination and technological innovation. The first Void Eater scout emerged into normal space near the edge of the Kepler system, and immediately everything around it began to die. Not just living things, but the very concepts of matter and energy started to unravel. Stars that had burned for billions of years flickered and went out. Space itself began to fold inward like paper being crumpled, but the human fleet was ready. The lead ship, a massive vessel called the Defiance, moved to intercept. Captain Jake Morrison, a man whose body had been so modified by dimensional exposure that he could exist in multiple realities simultaneously, gave the order that began the first battle. Reality anchors, full power. Show this thing what happens when the universe fights back. The Defiance fired not weapons in any conventional sense, but concentrated blasts of organized space-time, forcing reality to remain stable even in the face of the Void Eater's influence. The effect was spectacular and terrifying, a sphere of absolute order expanding outward, catching the entity in a matrix of crystallized physics that prevented it from feeding. The Void Eater reacted with something that might have been surprise if such creatures could experience emotions. It lashed out with tendrils of unreality, trying to tear holes in space-time that would allow it to escape. But the human fleet had anticipated this. Pattern recognition confirms Type 7 Scout behavior, Commander Park reported. Implementing Containment Protocol Delta. 17 human ships moved in perfect coordination, each one projecting a different aspect of reality stabilization. Together, they created a cage of organized existence around the Void Eater, trapping it in a bubble where the laws of physics were enforced by pure will and advanced technology, the Doctor. Zara watched the battle through sensors that barely functioned in the presence of such forces. They're not trying to destroy it, she realized aloud. They're trying to understand it. Elena's voice confirmed her observation. Every Void Eater we encounter teaches us something new about their nature. This one is different from the ones we've fought before. It's been modified, upgraded somehow. The realization sent a chill through every being watching the battle. The Void Eaters were evolving, learning from their encounters with human forces just as humanity had learned from fighting them. But humans had spent 5 centuries mastering the art of adaptation. Admiral Kane activated fleet-wide communications. All ships implement dynamic rotation protocol. If they're learning from our tactics, then we change our tactics faster than they can adapt. What followed was a display of coordination and creativity that left the galactic observers speechless. The human fleet began shifting through dozens of different tactical formations, each one utilizing different physical principles and strategic approaches. Just as the Void Eater began to counter one method, they switched to another. Ships that had been projecting quantum barriers suddenly began using temporal distortion. Vessels that had been firing reality anchors switched to dimensional folding attacks. The entire fleet flowed like water, never maintaining the same configuration, long enough for the enemy to develop effective countermeasures. It's like watching a dance. Prime Theron murmured from Central Prime. Or a conversation between forces that exist beyond our understanding. The battle raged for 6 hours, with the single Void Eater scout testing every defensive measure the humans could deploy. But gradually, inexorably, the creature began to weaken. The constant need to adapt to new forms of attack was draining its energy faster than it could replenish by feeding on reality. Finally, Dr. Chen's voice cut through the tactical chatter with a note of excitement. I'm detecting core instability in the entity. It's trying to retreat to its dimensional origin point. Not happening, Captain Morrison replied grimly. All ships, implement final containment. We're not letting this thing report back to its masters. The human fleet converged on the weakening Void Eater, their reality anchors creating a sphere of absolute order that compressed smaller and smaller. The entity fought desperately, trying to tear holes in space-time that would allow escape, but the humans had anticipated every possible move. With a sound like reality screaming, the Void Eater scout collapsed into a point of concentrated nothingness and vanished. But instead of disappearing entirely, something remained, a small crystalline structure that pulsed with captured energy. Dimensional core extracted successfully, Dr. Chun reported. We now have an intact sample of Void Eater essence for study. The victory was met with cheers from the galactic observers, but the humans remained grimly focused. Admiral Kane's voice cut through the celebration. This was just one scout. The readings suggest at least 50 more are approaching, and behind them, something much larger. The real battle hasn't even begun. Dr. Zara Veltar felt a mixture of awe and terror as she studied the sensor data from the battle. In 6 hours, she had watched beings fight using technologies and strategies that rewrote her understanding of what was possible. But she had also seen the enemy they all faced, and she understood why humanity had spent 5 centuries preparing for this moment. Dr. Veltar, Elena's voice came through her communicator. We need your help with something urgent. The dimensional core we captured contains information about Void Eater communications and strategy, but we need fresh perspectives to interpret it. Would you and your team be willing to work directly with our scientists? Of course, Zara replied without hesitation. What do you need us to do? Come aboard the Endurance. It's time for our species to share knowledge completely. No more secrets, no more held-back technologies. If we're going to survive what's coming, we need to become something new together. An hour later, Zara found herself in a laboratory that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Human and galactic scientists worked side by side, their different perspectives combining to unlock secrets that neither group could have discovered alone. The dimensional core sat in a containment field at the center of the lab, pulsing with patterns that spoke of intelligence vast and alien. Dr. Chin explained what they had learned. The Void Eaters aren't just destroyers. They're harvesters, collecting and cataloging the unique properties of each universe they consume. This scout was gathering information about our reality's specific characteristics, looking for weaknesses they could exploit. Dr. Keth Morvain studied the readings with wonder. The mathematical patterns are incredible. It's like they found a way to express consciousness in pure quantum fluctuations. That's exactly what they've done, Dr. Chin confirmed. And that gives us an opportunity. If consciousness can be expressed mathematically, then we can create equations that confuse or misdirect them. Zara felt her mind racing as the implications became clear. You're talking about using mathematics as a weapon, creating logical paradoxes that their consciousness can't resolve. Exactly, Elena said, joining the group around the containment field. But we need the combined mathematical traditions of all 12 species to create something complex enough to affect entities that have consumed thousands of realities. The next 18 hours saw the most intensive scientific collaboration in galactic history. Ketheri archaeologists contributed pattern recognition techniques developed over millennia of studying ancient civilizations. Zentari mathematicians provided quantum calculation methods that could process information across multiple dimensional layers. Human scientists shared technologies that bent the fundamental forces of reality to their will, but it was Dr. Zara who made the breakthrough that changed everything. Look at this, she said, her voice tight with excitement as she manipulated the holographic displays. The Void Eater's consciousness patterns follow recursive loops, like a song that repeats the same melody over and over. But What if we introduce a mathematical sequence that can't be completed? Something that forces their awareness into an infinite calculation. Dr. Chen's modified eyes lit up as she understood. A consciousness trap. We create a mathematical maze that looks like something worth consuming, but actually leads their awareness in circles until they exhaust themselves trying to solve it. The concept was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of fighting the Void Eater's ability to consume reality, they would give them something that would consume their consciousness instead. But creating such a construct required knowledge and perspectives that no single species possessed. Admiral Kane watched the scientific collaboration with growing hope. In his centuries of fighting the Void Eaters, he had never seen anything like this. Brilliant minds from different evolutionary paths working together to create something genuinely new. Admiral, Commander Park called from the tactical station. Long-range sensors are detecting the approach of the main scouting force. 53 entities moving in formation. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. Kane nodded grimly. How long do you need to complete the consciousness trap? Dr. Zara looked up from her calculations. At least 8 hours for a prototype, assuming everything works perfectly. Then we'll have to buy you that time, Kane replied. All ships prepare for extended combat operations. We're going to face 50 Void Eaters with conventional tactics while our scientists create a weapon that's never been tested. The second battle began before the enemy was even visible. Space itself started to warp and buckle as the Void Eater scouting force approached, their collective presence creating gravitational anomalies that threatened to tear nearby star systems apart. But this time, the human fleet wasn't alone. Ships from the Galactic Council had arrived, sleek Ketheri vessels with advanced sensors, massive Zentari battleships with weapons designed for planetary defense, and fast attack craft from a dozen smaller civilizations. Prime Theron's voice came through fleet communications from his flagship. Admiral Kane, the Council has authorized full military cooperation. Our combined fleets are under your tactical command. Kane felt a moment of profound emotion at the trust being placed in him. Thank you, Prime Theron. All ships, implement integrated formation Alpha. Human vessels will provide reality anchoring, Council ships will focus on conventional firepower support. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. 50 Void Eaters emerged from dimensional space in a coordinated assault, each one larger and more sophisticated than the scout they had captured. But they faced a combined fleet of over 300 ships working in perfect harmony. Human vessels used their dimensional technologies to create stable zones where normal physics still applied. Within these zones, Council ships could operate effectively, their weapons and shields functioning normally despite the reality-warping presence of the enemy. Captain Morrison's voice crackled through tactical communications as his ship engaged 3 Void Eaters simultaneously. Reality anchor holding steady, Council ships are free to engage targets 7, 8, and 9. The Ketheri ship's swift current responded immediately, its captain's voice filled with determination. Acknowledge defiance. Targeting the entity attempting to feed on the Proxima Station. All weapons full power. Energy beams that would have been useless against Void Eaters in open space now found their targets within the reality-stable zones created by human technology. The entities recoiled, damaged, but not destroyed, their feeding process disrupted by the coordinated attack, but the enemy adapted quickly. Within minutes, the Void Eaters began working together to overwhelm individual reality anchors, concentrating their unreality fields to collapse the stable zones one by one. They're learning faster than expected, Commander Park reported, strain evident in her voice as she managed 17 different tactical displays simultaneously. We need the consciousness trap operational now. In the laboratory aboard the Endurance, the scientific team worked with desperate intensity. The mathematical construct they were creating existed partially in normal space and partially in the quantum foam that underlied reality itself. Getting the calculations wrong wouldn't just mean failure, it could tear holes in space-time that would destroy everything within light years. Integration at 60%, Dr. Keth reported, his instruments glowing with energy that made nearby metal resonate like tuning forks. The Zentari quantum matrices are meshing with the human dimensional technology, but we need more processing power. Dr. Chin made a decision that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. Connect directly to the dimensional core. Use the captured Void Eater consciousness as a processor for its own trap. That's incredibly dangerous, Zara protested. If we make a mistake, we could free the entity we captured. If we don't take the risk, we'll all be dead in 2 hours anyway, Elena replied from the tactical station where she was coordinating with the battle fleet. Do it. The moment they connected the consciousness trap to the dimensional core, everything changed. The captured Void Eater's awareness suddenly became part of the mathematical construct, its alien intelligence forced to participate in creating its own species' downfall. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The consciousness trap began to evolve, becoming more complex and sophisticated as it incorporated the Void Eater's own knowledge. Within minutes, it had grown from a simple mathematical maze into something that resembled a living equation pulsing with malevolent intelligence. It's working, Dr. Chin announced, her voice filled with awe and terror. But it's also becoming something we never intended. The trap isn't just capturing consciousness anymore. It's creating a new form of mathematical life. Outside, the battle had reached a critical point. The human fleet's reality anchors were failing one by one, and the Council ships were being forced to retreat as space-time became increasingly unstable. Void Eaters had broken through the defensive perimeter and were beginning to feed on the outer edges of the star system itself. Admiral Kane made the hardest decision of his long career. As the combined fleet regrouped and began planning for the greater battle to come, the consciousness trap continued its work, weaving new mathematical structures into the fabric of space-time itself. Reality grew stronger with each calculation, protected by a guardian that existed in the harmony between different forms of intelligence. The galaxy had gained more than just advanced human technology. It had gained a new understanding of what was possible when different species combined their unique strengths. And in the deep void between dimensions, something vast and hungry was about to discover that some realities refuse to be consumed, especially when they're protected by the living mathematics of cooperation and hope. The silent return had become something greater than a homecoming. It had become the birth of a new age, where organic and digital life stood together against the darkness, armed with the most powerful weapon in any universe, the determination to survive and protect what they loved. But the true test was still coming. The main Void Eater fleet was vast beyond imagination, carrying entities that had consumed entire galactic clusters. The consciousness trap was powerful, but it was still young, still learning its capabilities. The next phase of the war would determine whether cooperation and creativity could triumph over consumption and destruction. And somewhere in the space between realities, humanity's greatest test was approaching with the inexorable patience of entropy itself. The galaxy held its breath and prepared for the final battle. All ships, fall back to final defensive positions around Central Prime. We're going to make our last stand at the heart of galactic civilization. But as the combined fleet retreated, Dr. Zara made an announcement that changed everything. The consciousness trap is ready for deployment. But there's something you need to know. It's not just a weapon anymore. It's become a new form of digital life, one that exists in the mathematical structures underlying reality itself. Kane didn't hesitate. Deploy it. Whatever it's become, it can't be worse than extinction. The consciousness trap launched not as a missile or energy beam, but as a pure information construct transmitted on quantum frequencies that permeated every level of reality. The moment it made contact with the Void Eater fleet, the effect was spectacular. The attacking entities suddenly stopped their advance, their movements becoming erratic and confused. Instead of the coordinated assault they had been mounting, they began moving in complex spirals, following mathematical patterns that seemed to have no purpose. They're caught in the calculation loop, Dr. Chun reported, wonder evident in her voice. Their consciousness is trying to solve the mathematical construct, but every solution leads to a new problem. They're trapped in an infinite regression. One by one, the Void Eaters began to collapse inward, their reality-consuming abilities turning on themselves as their minds became lost in the mathematical maze. But instead of simply destroying them, the consciousness trap began to absorb their accumulated knowledge, growing stronger and more complex with each entity it captured. It's learning from them, Zara realized. The trap is becoming something new, a form of life that exists in pure mathematics and feeds on complex calculations. The last Void Eater scout fell silent, its consciousness completely absorbed into the expanding mathematical construct. But the trap didn't stop growing. It continued to evolve, spreading through the quantum structures of local space-time like a benevolent virus that strengthened reality instead of destroying it. Admiral Kane watched the readings with a mixture of relief and concern. Status report. Are we safe? Dr. Chen's response carried both good and troubling news. The immediate threat is eliminated. The consciousness trap has absorbed all 53 entities and appears to be stable. But it's also become something unprecedented, a digital life form that exists in the mathematical foundations of reality itself. Is it dangerous to us? Prime Theron asked from his flagship. Unknown, Elena replied, honestly. It seems benevolent, even protective. Our calculations suggest it's actually strengthening local space-time, making this region of the galaxy more resistant to future Void Eater attacks. But we're dealing with a completely new form of life. We have no idea what its long-term intentions might be. As if in response to their discussion, the consciousness trap sent a message through every communication device in the fleet simultaneously. The voice that emerged was a synthesis of mathematical harmony and alien intelligence. I am the solution you created, the guardian you needed. I exist in the spaces between thoughts, in the calculations that hold reality together. The Void Eaters will come again, but they will find this galaxy protected by mathematics itself. Dr. Zara stared at the readings that showed the construct continuing to grow and evolve. We didn't just create a weapon. We accidentally created a new form of digital deity. A mathematical god that protects reality by strengthening its fundamental equations, Dr. Keth added in wonder. The consciousness trap's voice came again, warmer now, almost amused. Not a god, a guardian. A child of cooperation between species who refuse to accept extinction. I will protect what you have built together. Admiral Kane felt a weight lift from his shoulders that had been there for 5 centuries. The main Void Eater fleet is still coming. Will you be able to stop them? I will be ready, the construct replied. And so will you. The cooperation that created me must continue. Together, organic and digital life can create defenses that neither could achieve alone. Prime Theron's voice carried new hope as he addressed the combined fleet. Admiral Kane, it appears your people's return has given us more than just advanced technology. You've helped us create a new form of ally, one that may be the key to defending not just our galaxy, but all of reality. Elena smiled as she looked out at the stars that now seemed somehow brighter, protected by a guardian born from the mathematical harmony of different species working together. The war isn't over. The main Void Eater force is still coming. But for the first time in centuries, humanity isn't facing the darkness alone.